All right, welcome back. It's time for us to explore the heritage of Ga-Dangbe dance traditions. Now, as you know, this week we're focusing all our efforts and energies in discovering more and more about the traditions of the Ga-Dangbe peoples. And I've been joined by Ni Tete Iyate. He's the CEO of the Noyam African Dance Institute, all right? And he's going to get us into this conversation right away. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm as cool as ice.
Fantastic. It's good to have you here. So let's talk dance. How many different dance traditions do the Ga-Dangbe people have?
Okay. So you see, we have to look at this category of dances as an inherent part of the activities of the people.
Okay.
So as many activities as they are, from economic activities to political, activities of the people, to the rituals and ceremonies, the dances were a pivotal part of achieving a cultural intent,
Okay.
if you may. But we have to also understand that as time goes on these various activities become either prominent or less prominent, the various surrounding art forms that go with them might end up dying off and what have you. But amongst the Gas, there's a quite vast and varied forms of aesthetic and cultural expressions, from the ones we know like your Palogo and Gome to something more exotic and old like Waka, Aklama, and those kinds of dances that some were used as part of social events, others were for more integral cultural intents, if you may. And all these dances had various ways of manifesting and various levels of aesthetics being used.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah.
Now, Ghana took dance to the world.
Yes.
Through an indigenous Ga-Dangbe person many years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I was very young then. Tell us a little bit about that and how significant was that?
So, let me just take you back a bit.
Yes.
Now, our current dance traditions and how we express ourselves is a combination of, various seemingly insignificant actions that have happened over time.
Okay.
Because you have to understand, just before independence, there was a lot of, vibe in Ghana, and Accra for that matter, because Accra was like a melting pot. You had dances like Gome, that were heavily influenced by, by the fishing trade, and besides cocoa, another place that Ghana got something good from, Fernando Po, was actually the Gome dance, because you had fisher folks from here traveling, along the coast, working, and then interacting with other slaves, freed slaves and other, other cultures. Now, these were brought back, and then, mind you, Accra was the governing capital of Ghana.
Yes.
So you had the foreign influence also here. Now, these elements came together in bringing out, at that time, what might have seemed like a contemporary and vibrant, dance forms.
Okay.
So you had your Gomes, you had your Palogos, you had your Kolomashis being, revived.
Okay. Now, there's so much to talk
Yes.
about, right? Now, there's a phrase.
Yes.
Ablekuma. How do I say it? Abekumawo. Abakumawo. What does it mean? Ablekuma, Abakumawo. Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, Ablekuma, Abakumawa. Now, these are some of the traditional idioms that are, are spoken, but also lend themselves to how, the expressions of the people manifest.
Okay.
So something, an expression like this goes to tell how the background of the people comes at the fore when the people need to express themselves, if to give a general summary of that. And that comes to how we use our dances. Now, you were alluding to, and I'm sure that was Ajete Soa.
Ajete Soa, yes,
alluding to
I
earlier
was.
on. Now, this was a young man in the 80s, and had interacted with people like my late father, Professor Niate,
Okay.
in how they put the identity of Ghana
Yeah.
in terms of performance.
Yeah.
So if you critically look at the performance he took on the world stage, you can see the narrative and expression in the body. You can see the choice of movement vocabulary and also the textures of how these performances were rendered. Now, this blew the people away in those times.
Yeah.
Now, if you fast forward to what is happening now in Ghana, where we're trying to find a contemporary voice.
Yeah.
Now, this was heavily influenced by late Professor Niate,
Okay.
a Ga-Dangbe man.
Yes.
And drew from the tradition, drew from the aesthetics, used that to find a new voice of expression, but heavily, rooted in the traditional ways of expression. And that is the way we should go.
Tell us a little bit about your father.
Yes. So in the early 70s, towards the late 70s, he got himself, at the University of Ghana, where he studied under the late Professor Mario Opoku, Ghana's first professor in dance. So what Niate did, and his contribution to the development of dance in Ghana, was the beginnings of exploring contemporary African dance. Now, the idea was that each generation would end up creating new dance forms. But how do we present new dance forms that have the idioms from our traditional culture?
Okay.
This will help preserve the heritage of the people, but also give them a unique voice on the global stage. So he set up the Noyam, and even the word Noyam comes from the Ga-Dangbe, which means to move on, to develop, to progress.
Oh, okay.
The Gas will say Noya.
Noya.
I think Akan is in Koso,
Yeah.
something like that. So Noyam
Noyam.
captures the philosophy of where we see the future of Ghanaian dance,
Okay.
to add upon. So to add upon, you have to have studied the traditional elements
course.
and then use that as a springboard, as a new way of expressing ideas, but they have to speak to your culture.
I see. So how much impact do you think, looking at, let's go back to, let's say, pre-independence, independence time, how much impact has dance had on development?
Beautiful. And this is one area we totally overlook. Now, we can look at dance as two ways. What we normally do is look at is, artistic rendition,
Yes.
how beautiful, how the dance is. But we have to understand that the dance is always given birth to by circumstances.
Okay. Okay.
And then most of the time, if people need to express themselves or are limited in some way or the other, the art provides that beautiful avenue for not only documenting and capturing the vibe of that time, but also capturing the philosophies and aspirations of the people that are putting those dances together. Now, you look at Accra. Accra has heavily influenced the new traditional dances. Now, these are dances that were taken from the traditional context, as you were, and changed a little so that they could be represented on the conventional stage, if you may. Now, to be able to do that, you have to have a strong understanding of the culture, first of all. But there has to be some amount of exploration and that drive to dare to do change or to dare to effect change. And that was able to have happened because of how Accra was and how the dance traditions were being reappropriated.
Yeah.
Because if you take Kolo Mashi like this, which originated from certain traditional processional dances,
Okay.
incorporated new instruments, incorporated new ways of presenting them. That gave birth to, that got itself into the palogos and what have you, which are also influencing how new dances are being created. You look, you look at our landscape. You had mentioned Gasmila in our earlier conversations, and other people in the industry that they bring out a dance, or a dance comes out and then it spreads like wildfire because it becomes an avenue for people to express individuality. It becomes an avenue for them to express themselves through means of artistic language. And that is very imperative. That is very important. That same idea we can translate into our way of politics. We can translate into the cultural hegemony of the people that, as we are. That we should be able to interrogate old ways and then find new appropriate ways of expressing ourselves.
Okay. No, I like that. I like that a lot. We should We should maintain
It has to, it has
the
to be
traditions
preserved.
of what
Yes.
we have, but
Yes.
find new ways of appropriating.
Exactly, and these things, these
appreciating.
traditions can coexist. You go to other countries, their traditional forms are there, and you can see the link, you can see the development between the traditional idioms and aesthetics and ways of presentation, and how that is informing the new crop of performers and new crops of ideas.
Okay, so let's talk about your preservation of, let's say, your father's legacy.
Yes.
What are you doing?
So, right now, the idea of Noyam, in fact, goes beyond my father. It will certainly go beyond me. But the core of what we do is to develop a Ghanaian way of expressing contemporary African dance. Because over the last 2 decades plus, various African countries, as they begin to interact with the world, are developing new ways of expressing themselves. But the question is, how much of your traditional element stays?
Okay.
Because with the new forms of expression, you leave a lot on the choreographer, you leave a lot on the creator. So depending on the philosophy of which is birthing how the artistic forms are presented, it's going to heavily skew the direction. So what Noyam is doing is to take the traditional elements and then reimagine them. Ask ourselves, if our ancestors existed today, there's internet, there are airplanes, there's computers and what have you, and then they had to create dances that spoke heavily to their people, how would the dances manifest? How much of the core elements of our various art forms, the textures, the costume, the vocabulary, movement movement textures, how do they render? And how do you apply your current experiences to it? So that in one stroke, you are speaking a voice of a new generation, but you are using the idioms of your ancestors, if you may. So that was the core philosophy that the late Professor Niati had. And that is what is guiding Noyam's way of presenting, creating and presenting art.
I think there's just way too much for us to talk about, and so we'll probably have to bring you back another time again. But thank you very much for sharing this with us.